My earliest memories are not of bedtime stories or warm embraces, but of comparisons, subtle at first, then sharpened with age into something that felt like small cuts across my heart. In my family, love was conditional, measured in trophies, grades, and the volume of applause you could generate. And in that world, my older brother Arav was the shining crown jewel, while I was everything else. At every family gathering, relatives would swarm around him the way bees gather around the sweetest flower. Arav Beta, you won the Science Olympiad again. You will make your parents so proud, doctor or engineer, yes. Their attention was suffocating, but at least it was warm. When eyes eventually turned my way, the tone shifted, always joking, always playful, but the words landed heavy. This is Anya. My father would say with a laugh, our disappointment daughter, and everyone would laugh with him. I learned to smile along, pretending I didn't feel the word disappointment echo through my bones long after the guests had left. My mother, never one to waste time on softness, assessed me the way some people inspect fruit for defects. If I showed interest in art, useless hobby. If I asked to join a science club, don't embarrass yourself next to Arav. If I stayed quiet, why can't you be more confident? If I spoke too much, why are you so loud? It was as if every version of me was wrong, and yet I loved something they never understood: dirt, soil, plants, growing things. I loved crouching in the backyard with my tiny plastic trowel, digging holes, feeling the earth crumble between my fingers. There was a peace in the soil, unhurried, unjudging. A seed didn't complain when you planted it crooked. It simply did what it was meant to do, try its best to grow. By the time I reached high school, my fascination had evolved. I loved reading about agricultural tech, soil microbiomes, crop behavior, climate, resistant farming. I scribbled diagrams of irrigation systems in the margins of my notebooks during math class. I saved up to buy cheap sensors and Arduino boards to tinker with moisture readings. Whenever my parents caught me working on those projects, the reaction was always the same. Anya, my mother said once, walking in on me soldering wires at my desk, what kind of girl wastes time with this? You will never get anywhere playing with mud. My father's words were sharper. You're not good at anything that matters. Focus on something real as if the earth that fed us wasn't real. Still, I tried, God, I tried. To make them proud in the traditional ways, I joined the debate team, hated it, quit. I attempted advanced math tutoring, failed it, and was compared to Arav for weeks. I shadowed a local doctor for a school project and nearly fainted during a blood draw. Nothing fit. Nothing felt like me, so at 17, when I told my parents I had applied to an agricultural engineering program, they stared at me as if I'd announced my intention to join the circus. Agriculture? My father repeated, like farming. That's not a real degree. My mother said, do something respectable. Do something that won't embarrass us. My father added, that night, while they argued downstairs about how I was throwing away my future, I packed my bags quietly. I wasn't running away. I was simply choosing not to stay somewhere I was constantly told I didn't belong. When I left the house at dawn, my parents didn't stop me. Maybe they assumed I'd fail and come crawling back. Maybe they hoped I would. But the road ahead felt wide and untamed, like a field after harvest waiting for someone brave enough to plant the first seed. University life was nothing like the glossy brochures suggested. There were no scenic study groups laughing under trees, no easy friendships formed over late night pizza, no professors who took special interest in my strange obsessions. The reality was grit, raw, lonely, relentless grit. My dorm room was barely larger than a storage closet, but it became the heart of my world. Half my desk was covered in textbooks and loan statements. The other half was cluttered with wires, circuit boards, cracked beakers, and soil samples labeled with fading marker. My roommate hated the smell. I pretended not to notice when she Febrezed the room every evening. Money was a constant worry, a shadow I couldn't escape. I worked 3 part-time jobs, mornings at the library, shelving books, evenings as a lab assistant cleaning equipment, weekends scrubbing dishes until my fingernails ached. My paycheck never stretched far enough, but quitting wasn't an option. Freedom had come at a cost, and I intended to pay every cent of it. Classes were difficult in a way that felt exhilarating and crushing at once. Sensors and instrumentation nearly broke me. My early prototypes for soil monitoring devices either failed to detect anything or detected everything, including my roommate's hair straightener. which apparently had similar heat signatures to damp soil. I got used to the bitter smell of burning wires, to prying melted plastic off my desk, to quietly apologizing to the array when smoke trickled into the hallway. Still, every failure taught me something, nudging me closer to whatever it was I was trying to build, though I couldn't yet define it. All I knew was that soil held secrets, and I wanted to translate them. On days when exhaustion clawed at my ribs, I heard my mother's voice in my head, "Waste of time, you'll never get anywhere." Somehow that pushed me harder. By my 3rd year, I started hanging around the outskirts of the agricultural research fields behind campus. Real farms, real soil, real problems. That was where learning happened. That's also where I met Mr. Singh, a local farmer attending a university workshop. He wore a faded turban and a despair heavy enough that you could see it in the set of his shoulders. "My crops keep dying," he confessed when I struck up a conversation. "Everyone tells me the same solutions. None of them work." He spoke like a man carrying generations of land on his back. Something in me softened. "Let me try something," I said before I could second guess myself. A week later, I was in his fields, wide stretches of earth cracked from drought, dotted with wilted wheat struggling for life. I planted my shaky prototype into the ground. It was nothing but a clumsy bundle of sensors, wrapped in electrical tape, connected to a salvaged microcontroller that beeped unpredictably. But when the first reading appeared on my tiny laptop screen, a real-time moisture level, it felt like the universe had exhaled. We adjusted irrigation, we monitored nutrients, we tracked patterns, and when the next harvest came, his yields rose by 22%. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You saved my farm, Bitty." I didn't save anything I wanted to say. I just listened. To the soil, to the data, to the world everyone else ignored. Word spread faster than I expected. Suddenly I was helping 3 farms, then 7. Students volunteered. Professors grew curious. People started calling what I was doing a project. But in my heart, I knew it was a seed, one I wasn't ready to stop watering. By graduation, that seed had a name: Root Sense. Tiny, fragile, unfunded, unproven, but undeniably alive. Root Sense began in a rental garage that cost more than it was worth and smelled like old paint, damp cardboard, and broken dreams. The landlord had converted it into a workspace by installing a single flickering bulb and calling it renovated. Still, to me, it was perfect. A place no one could call a hobby. No one could dismiss as childish. No one could take away. I bought a foldable table off a student forum, dragged in 2 mismatched chairs, and wrote Root Sense on a sheet of printer paper. Seeing the name taped to the bare wall made something stir inside me. It wasn't success, not yet. It was possibility. My first team member was my classmate, Ishan, an introverted coder with brilliant ideas and the social skills of a startled goat. But he believed in Root Sense from the first time I explained the concept. I powered soil sensors that could help farmers optimize water, nutrients, and crop cycles with data instead of guesswork. "No one is doing this at an accessible cost," he said, pushing up his crooked glasses. "We could fix that. We could." But investors didn't think so. Our early pitch meetings were brutal. Men in press suits raised their eyebrows the second I introduced myself. Some asked if I had a male partner. Others suggested I focus on marketing instead of engineering. One man spent our entire pitch correcting my terminology incorrectly, I might add, and then told us we'd never scale. I learned to swallow humiliation the way other people swallowed vitamins daily, without hesitation, because it was necessary for survival. But the farms didn't care about my age or gender. They cared about results. When Mr. Singh's neighbor tried Root Sense, his tomato yield improved. Then a sugarcane farmer joined. Then a dairy farm. Every week, someone new called asking if this soil reading thing could help them too. By year 2, our shabby garage was overflowing with cheap components, wires, data printouts, and prototypes that beeped at random intervals. Ishan and I worked 14-hour days, often napping on the floor, because our chairs weren't sturdy enough to lean on. But our sensor accuracy went from 65% to 92%, and our irrigation prediction models hit reliable benchmarks for the first time. That's when the press noticed. A small local paper ran a story about 2 young engineers helping struggling farmers using inexpensive tech. A week later, a national magazine published an article calling Root Sense the future of sustainable farming. Investors who once dismissed us were suddenly very interested in a meeting. I remember telling Ishan, should we take their calls? He shrugged. Maybe make them wait a day. for emotional satisfaction. We didn't wait, of course. We needed funding too desperately. But for the first time, we had the power to choose. With the funding we finally secured, our team expanded to 6 people. We moved into a shared co-working space, upgraded our manufacturing, and designed a cleaner prototype. The new RootSense sensor was sleek, durable, solar, powered, and capable of transmitting real-time data to an app farmers could use even with low connectivity. The impact was immediate. Water usage in partner farms dropped dramatically. Crop yields increased. Farmers who had been trapped in debt cycles saw a path forward. Success spread like wildflowers, and even though my parents never called, I knew they saw it. My mother viewed every interview I did. My father followed RootSense's social media, always silent, always watching. Their pride and disbelief hung in the air like unspoken confessions. For the first time in my life, I felt seen not by them, but by the world I had chosen for myself. RootSense wasn't just a startup anymore. It was proof that I had been right to follow the soil. The morning the offer came, I was wearing mismatched socks and eating reheated noodles out of a plastic container, the glamorous life of a startup founder. Ishan was sprawled across our office couch, asleep with a laptop balanced dangerously on his stomach. We'd been up all night, bugging a firmware update that kept crashing at 2% completion. My phone buzzed. Normally, I ignored calls from unknown numbers, but exhaustion dulled my instincts. I picked up. "Hello, this is Anya, MS Verma," said a smooth voice I didn't recognize. "This is Richard Hale from AgroGlobe International. I believe we emailed you last quarter. We'd like to discuss an acquisition." I shot upright so fast I spilled noodles on my hoodie. An acquisition, no. The acquisition, the global giant we had dreamed of partnering with. I put the call on speaker. Ishan fell off the couch with a thud. The conversation blurred into a surreal haze. They'd studied our work. They loved our mission. They wanted RootSense, not just our tech, but our approach to helping small farmers. They wanted to scale us globally. And then came the number, $8.5 million. I felt the words hit me, soft and shattering. 8.5 million. When the call ended, Ishan and I stared at each other in silence. Then we screamed. We screamed until our voices cracked, until other teams in the co-working space peeked in to check if we were dying. We weren't dying. We were alive in a way I had never felt before. Signing the contract was like stepping into a new version of myself. Lawyers talked. Investors congratulated us. Journalists requested interviews. Farmers sent me voice notes filled with blessings. My team hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might break. I should have felt unstoppable, but instead I felt tender because I knew who would see the headlines next. 2 days after the deal was finalized, my phone rang again. This time I recognized the number instantly. My stomach twisted into a knot so familiar it almost hurt. My mother. I hesitated before answering. The little girl inside me braced for disappointment, but the voice that greeted me was unsteady, fragile. "Anya," she said, "we saw the news." My father spoke next, clearing his throat. "We always knew you were capable." Maybe we didn't say it enough. I closed my eyes. There it was, the rewriting of history, the quiet refusal to acknowledge the scars, the attempt at softness after years of sharp edges. "You didn't say it at all," I replied gently. Silence stretched between us, not angry, just truthful. "We want to see you," my mother finally whispered. I let the words settle. If they had said this years ago, I would have dropped everything and run home. But now, I felt no hunger for their approval, only clarity. "I'll visit," I said after a long breath, "not because I owe you anything, but because I've grown past needing your permission to live my life." I heard my mother's quiet sob. My father exhaled shakily. Maybe this was healing. Maybe it wasn't, but it was real. After the call, I stepped outside the office. The sun hit my face, warm and bright, and for the first time I understood something simple and profound. I wasn't the disappointment daughter. I was the seed they forgot to water, the seed that pushed through the dark, through the cold, through the weight of their doubts. And now I had grown into an orchard of my own making. An orchard worth $8.5 million. Yes, but more importantly, worth believing in myself, even when no one else did.